still talking about practice in the time of the crisis that we're currently in, and being able to hopefully move practice forward with educators, and that would include teachers and administrators. So a couple of logistical pieces. We are utilizing Zoom. Just if you probably are very familiar with Zoom features. We've asked that you mute yourself. We have enabled that particular feature with Zoom as people enter. But if you would please mute yourself so it eliminates any background noise. We've enabled it so only the co-host and the hosts will be able to share screens. We will be utilizing the chat feature to take questions. We'll be monitoring that and allowing for questions to come up so that we can make sure that we answer them. We will be archiving this meeting, and it will be posted to our YouTube account, both for the TPA and the Cal APA on the Commission's web YouTube account. So with that, what I'd like to do is have Amy lead us through our introductions, and then we'll introduce our guest presenters for today.
Great, thank you, James. So my name is Amy Rising. I'm the Director of Performance Assessment Policy and Development for the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And I'm very happy to be here with you today, and thank you for joining us. I would like Wayne Baser to introduce himself next.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being a part of this, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar.
And Gay Roby.
Hi, this is Gay Roby. I'm a consultant with the Professional Services Division, and I work with administrative services credentialing programs, both preliminary and clear.
Great, welcome Gay. And then James, of course, we all know you, but please introduce yourself again.
Hello, good afternoon. James Webb, consultant with Performance Assessment Development, working with both the Cal APA and Cal TPA, but also working on the design for the special education Cal TPA that we're currently in design and construction of.
And then we have two really wonderful guest expert speakers with us today. So we want to welcome Dr. Juliet Fine and Mr. Jeff Pelzel from Superintendent from the Newhall School District. So turn back to you, James, if you want to introduce them, please.
Yes, so Jeff, if you could just say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity.
And Juliet, if you wouldn't mind saying a hello.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're so pleased to be part of this conference call.
Okay, and just to let the group know, Juliet and Jeff are both in the Newhall School District. Juliet is the principal at Meadows Elementary School, which is in Valencia, California. And Jeff is superintendent, I believe, in your third year. Is that correct, Jeff? Second year, thank you. Prior to that, Jeff was the assistant superintendent of educational services for the Newhall School District. And now he heads the school district as its superintendent. So again, thank you so much and welcome. Just briefly, our agenda for today. Jeff and Juliet are going to talk a little bit about effective coaching, also what it means to be coaching educators during this time when we are all engaged in distance learning and distance communication. Jeff will talk a little bit about what he does to facilitate coaching for administrators in the Newhall School District. Even though the focus for today's webinar will mainly focus on looking at administrative coaching, we would like to let the field know, and hopefully you will be able to make connections between coaching that is being done with administrators and also the coaching that could also be accomplished with teachers. Then Juliet and Jeff will actually enter into a coaching conversation, and we're going to have the participants look at what it is that they are doing when they are involved in their conversation, and actually give us some feedback on that. And then we will close out our webinar today with some questions and answers. So with that, just a reminder, we are recording this particular webinar. It will be available on our YouTube channel. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it to our presenters and let them begin with the idea of what is coaching.
Well, thank you, James, again for this opportunity. In the Newhall School District, when we think about coaching, it really comes from a strengths-based stance for working with our teachers and our site administrators. You know, we really developed this philosophy that our administrators can't lead what they don't know. So our job and our role in our district is to support our principals and help build their capacity. And when we look at our teachers, again, we are operating from that strengths-based stance and really trying to find areas of incremental growth with them, not trying to basically eat the elephant all at once, but really finding those targeted areas that they want to grow their practice in, and really finding the ways that we can partner with them, work side by side, and provide them those opportunities. Juliet, would you like to share your perspective as a site administrator around coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. Different than the one-stop evaluation where we have a meeting in the beginning of the year and a meeting to close out the year. I think what's been powerful about this particular strategy or approach in working with me is the opportunity to have an ongoing dialogue. And it really has placed ownership in my hands. It hasn't been my superintendent telling me how to grow. And when we talk about in the Newhall School District, we talk a lot about growth mindset. It's really given me the opportunity to focus in on what I intuitively know as a professional, where I need to grow within my practice.
Go ahead, James. So I'm going to just give you a chance here to read this quote. Okay, go ahead, James. So this just gives you, from our perspective, the look at what we believe coaching really is and coaching is not. So it's that ongoing, you know, contextualized support in this case, whether you're a site administrator, whether it's the principal or assistant principals, even as all the way up to my assistant superintendents, we engage in the same exact work with them, directors in our district, all the way down to our classroom teachers. It's really the context of where they're working and the support that we can give them. It's really not training that's done to them. It's not, you say, I need you to go to this, or I need you to do this. It's really working side by side in a collaborative relationship. You know, it's that emotional support and advocacy for the person that we're working with. It's not me supervising her, and like Juliet talked about in the beginning, probably in most systems, and honestly in my prior experiences before we implemented this work in Newhall School District 5 years ago, generally speaking, when I, in my educational career, I was a high school assistant principal, I was a middle school principal for 8 years. In all of those leadership experiences, generally what my evaluation looked like and my coaching support looked like was a check-in at the beginning of the year. What's your plan for the year? What are your targets? Maybe you might get a mid-year check-in if you're lucky. And then ultimately it's coming back, sitting down and saying, okay, here's your evaluation for the year. Sometimes maybe you're even writing your own evaluation, but it really was not an ongoing sort of formative assessment process in terms of the work. And then in terms of it being neutral observation, it's a neutral observation of the recipient and the situation. It really is sort of that, we're there to partner with them. And I love these words, it's not therapy, and it certainly is not paperwork. What you'll see today as we go through this process, we have internalized this into a Google Doc. So all of my, I evaluate 5 of my principals in the district, my assistant sup of instruction evaluates 3, and my assistant superintendent of HR evaluates 2 other principals. Each of those, we have shared Google Drives with them, and our docs are all in there so that we always have access to them. And it isn't a matter of Juliet submitting things to me or filling out paperwork for me to then transpose onto a summative evaluation. It really is, it's basically all the research tells us. It's formative, it's ongoing process throughout our time. Juliet, anything you want to add to that?
I just want to, yeah, just in terms of the coaching role, I think different than the alternative model, which is very much, I think, top down. I feel like you were the facilitator and helping me think through and really problem solve as I was working through my evaluation process. So we had a lot of opportunities to have really deep conversations about the work. And I felt like just, you know, stepping aside, I feel like you had lots of opportunities to see me. It was very holistic in the approach. And I feel like probably different than other principals, it was really driven by my work on my site. So when you say contextualize, it was all about my particular school, my community, my teachers that I'm working with, and the individual problems or issues that I was trying to solve as a principal. So it was very much, like you said, Jeff, a partnership throughout the process. And I think for me as the principal on the receiving end, I felt empowered working through an evaluation. And I don't know how many times I've ever said that in my entire experience as an educator.
Okay, what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to stop sharing and then share again, because I believe I'm sharing the presentation mode. So I want to make sure that I have the correct information to be sharing. So if you would please just give me a moment and I will go back and share it correctly. Is this better?
It's bigger.
Okay, so you don't see, okay, great. I got a yes. Okay, so Jeff, are you ready to move on?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect, thank you.
So I wanted to give you, I felt like it would be important for us to give you a little context around what this work has looked like in the Newhall School District. So 5 years ago, we began a journey with Center for Educational Leadership, which is a branch of education department at the University of Washington up in Seattle. And so when I was actually lived in the Seattle area prior to moving to California, and we had adopted their teaching frameworks called the 5 Dimensions of Teaching and Learning when I was a director up there. And when I came down to the Newhall School District, that's one of the things that I really wanted to work on moving our district towards, was having an instructional framework. And at the time, they were beginning the conversations around an instructional framework for leadership as well. So we utilize the 5 Dimensions of Teaching and Learning as our teaching and learning framework. And then we use the 4 Dimensions of Instructional Leadership as our framework and evaluation for our site administrators. And so there's tons of research behind why we went with this framework. Most importantly, it's all about equity. They've had 2 major independent studies that have been vetted, been in place for about 20 years, that have shown that when school districts implement this teaching framework and evaluation tool, that opportunity gap that divides off many of our subgroups and student groups that we have in our district, it's actually eliminated over time. So that is why we embarked on this journey. And we're at the process now where the 5D is an evaluation tool for our teachers, and the 4D, 4 Dimensions of Instructional Leadership, are part of our work for our site administrators. Go ahead, James. So this graphic gives you a real alignment around what we believe in our district is what will ultimately result in increased student learning. So our district leadership team, as I said before, we engage in the use of the 4 Dimensions of Instructional Leadership with all of my district level leaders. So my assistant superintendent of business services, my assistant superintendent of HR, student support services, instructional, superintendent of instruction, they also are evaluated in this framework as well. So it starts with all of us knowing the work, engaging in the work, and then that really is disseminated out to our school sites. So we have school leadership and we have teacher effectiveness. All of our schools, and you'll see this as we talk through Juliet's evaluation process today, all of our schools have what are called instructional leadership teams. And those leadership teams are consisting of anywhere between 4 to 6 teachers. We're an elementary only district. So principals generally have 4 to 5 teachers. They have someone who specializes in English language supports, and those groups do all the planning for the work for the course of the year, and they've gone through some intensive training around understanding this work. And then as we talked about before, the teacher effectiveness, we have this expertise, we have coaches in our system, we have this instructional framework that we utilize with our teachers, and that is connected to the teacher evaluation tool, the 5D teacher evaluation tool that we use. And ultimately, those things create greater outputs when we look at our student achievement. And right now, we're on this journey like everyone else is in California around the dashboard data and all of those kind of things. Just to give a little context around Newhall, it's a district of 10 schools with about a little over 6,000 students, but we do have about 45% of our kids who are economically disadvantaged qualify for free or reduced lunch. A third of our kids are English learners. But what I'm really proud of, when you look at our dashboard data for English language arts and mathematics, in fact, we just found out today, they did some recalibrating of the English language arts scores. We thought we were green in ELA and blue in math, which is where you want to be, but we actually found out we just got a new rating, and so we are back to being blue in ELA this year and blue in math. So, we believe this through line for our teachers and our site administrators is what's creating this continuity. And then it's this coaching conversation that we're going to engage with you so you can observe us is really what's leading this work. Go ahead, James.
Jeff, before we move forward, I'm wondering if you could just explain briefly around how you already use some distance, guidelines with regard to engaging in conversations with Juliet or with your other principals, utilizing a Google platform, just to kind of, you have this great base that you already have implemented, but how you kind of take it to the next level with regard to communicating with your principals to honor their schedules and, keep them at their sites.
Yeah, so we are using, in our classroom, we're using Google Classroom, but within our coaching conversations and our leadership meetings, we're using a Zoom platform. We meet every single Friday with all of our site administrators around our leadership, in our leadership team modality. Sometimes there's trainings going on, sometimes it's a nuts and bolts kind of thing, but I'm already engaging in these coaching cycles. And literally today, what you're gonna see would be a natural coaching conversation that would occur with any of my 5 principals. In fact, last week, I met with all 4 of my principals. We engage in this shared learning platform. All of these resources I mentioned before are housed within our Google Docs and a shared drive and those kind of things, so that throughout the year, as we're engaging in this work, Juliet can type in things, I can enter things as we experience them or see them in action. And so we look for these different opportunities. And I want to build on something that Juliet shared earlier around this evaluation process and coaching. One of the things that we shifted this year was not just going to a school site, meeting with the principal, maybe walking some classrooms and looking at the lens of a principal solely in terms of just the instructional piece, but we have actually engaged with them in observing them facilitate IEPs, facilitate their school site council meetings, facilitate their instructional leadership team meetings. And what's really cool is even in this distance learning platform, in the last 2 weeks, I've observed a school site council meeting, a principal facilitating that work, an instructional leadership team meeting as well. And coming next week, I have some IEPs that are taking place. So This feels very natural, other than, I'm not going to be sitting across from Juliet like I normally would in her office, or she coming to my office. But the dialogue, I don't feel like we miss a beat in terms of that context.
If I could just add, Jeff and James, would that be okay? In terms of the work, it's been consistent throughout. I mean, I think for Jeff as a superintendent, his priorities have been very clear since day one. He's trained us on 2 major initiatives, the cell work and Dr. Cruz's equity work. And that's been a theme that's been expected to be woven in every aspect of my day, from working with the kids, to the teachers, to the parents, and all the meetings. And so I would say, just kind of stepping back, it's this alignment of priorities that has made this process like really clear for me as on the receiving end, as my evaluator. I know what he's looking for in every aspect of it, but it's been an ongoing dialogue. Like I said, I've had the opportunity to be reflective in my practice. So while I'm being evaluated and there's a rubric, I'm able to reflect on the work as we're working through it, and it's ongoing conversation. So I really appreciate that piece of this.
Okay. So this just, I felt like this was a good overview. So when we talk about the 4 dimensions of instructional leadership, there are 4, I'll just call them areas: oversight. So area 1 is called vision, mission, and culture building. That is the first domain. And then there are indicators under that that make up that domain. And then there's the improvement of instructional practice, which is domain 2. Then there's an allocation of resources, which you know what that probably means. And then the management of people and process. So there's 4 areas, and our work and how we approach this work is, a lot of times, people are being evaluated, and there's all these different categories that you're looking at, or indicators that you're being tasked to take on. How we approach the work in Newhall School District is we allow our site administrators, whether it's a principal, assistant principal, or even like I told you, my assistant superintendent level people, they pick between 2 to 3 indicators in different domains for them to target their plan for what they're going to do over the course of the year. So we have a coaching conversation in the very beginning of the year around what are those indicators, and then we begin to develop and evolve what that plan looks like. And so you're going to get a chance to see, as we go through this, what that work has looked like over the course of this year.
And Jeff, if you don't mind, I think what might be a good piece to help, since we are focusing on administrators, is, can you walk us through maybe a little bit of how this also complements the capsules here in California? Definitely I can see that, but maybe, make those connections a little bit more clear for the folks in the webinar.
Yeah, so I mean, when you and that's one of the important pieces. We did this with the 4D instructional leadership framework and the 5D teaching framework. We did a crosswalk to look at the capsules and overlay where those areas fit. So we wanted to make sure that, yes, this is research-based. We know the power behind it, but then you also have regulations and those kind of things that you have to fall and adhere to. So these are crosswalked into the different capsules that we're asking our administrators to engage in. What's very, very interesting is this whole process that we began with the Center for Educational Leadership is all an inquiry approach. It's all a cycle of inquiry where we're growing our practice. And when our newest administrators into our district, our assistant principals, had to go through and earn their clear credential, the fit between the work that was happening in our school district and the work that was happening as part of the admin induction program that actually James was overseeing in the William S. Hart School District, they were so aligned. I mean, there was a perfect marriage between that work and the work that was going on and the work that we asked people to engage in on a regular basis in our school district. So it wasn't an add-on. It was a perfect fit. And our administrators were able to write to those based upon our work in the 4D and the indicators within that, and seamlessly connect to the capsules that are out there and what those expectations are for them.
And Jeff, to that end, what you just described, how many of your administrators have been, you've had, because you have a group of newer administrators, how many have been through the CLEAR induction program and cleared through that process?
I think it's been in the last 3 years, and I think with those that are going through it now, I think it'll be 8 or 9 that will have gone through that process. And I mean, they've loved the induction process because it fits. It isn't something else that they're doing on top of. And it's just very, very powerful. They absolutely loved the process and the work that they were engaged in throughout. And it was just a great learning opportunity for them throughout the process. So it was really great.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So this just gives you a little overview. You know, we went through this year around, I just wanted you to, this is a nice little segue into our mission, vision, and work and stuff. So James, if you don't mind, can I go ahead and share?
Sure. What I'm going to do is I will actually stop sharing. But before I do that, I'm going to just go and let folks know if you want to get those pieces ready, and then I'll stop sharing and let you go in. But what we wanted to do was, while this coaching conversation occurs between Jeff and Juliet, we were thinking it might be kind of fun if those of you who are in the Northern California area and could focus on Jeff and see what it is that Jeff does. And we'd like you to maybe focus on the coaching stems and the questions that Jeff asks. And as you're watching Jeff in the way that he is coaching Juliet, think about how does he accomplish the goals of coaching in his conversation with Juliet. And so if you could just kind of keep those ideas in your mind, what we would do is then, as you would like to share them, put them in the chat and really kind of focus on what Jeff is doing to help facilitate this conversation. And then those of you who are in the Southern California area, focus on Juliet and focus on the way in which she responds to the coaching. How does she listen in? Does she go with where he would like to take her? And really kind of focus on how she responds to Jeff's coaching stems and questions. And that's going to be the exercise that we're going to ask you as the participants to engage with as Juliet and Jeff go through their coaching exercise. One other housekeeping piece, a little bit of logistics. If you haven't already done so, you can pin the videos of Jeff and Juliet so that you can focus on them. In order to do that, you just go up into their screen and click on the 3 dots that are in the upper right-hand corner and pin their videos. For the purposes of the webinar, as I'm recording, I have pinned their videos, but it might help you to focus on them so that you can watch what it is that they're doing and see how they react. And so with that, Jeff, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to you to then begin your conversation with Juliet.
Great. Thank you, James. Okay, so I wanted to make this as authentic as it can for us because this is really how we engage in the work. So this is the Google Doc that I was sharing with you earlier that we utilize throughout this process all year long. So Juliet has, just to give you a little context here, Juliet has focused on 2 different areas. The first one being on the vision and mission work, and you can see her targeted indicator, which is align stakeholders' decisions and actions to the vision and mission of the school and demonstrates growth mindset. She's been working on that throughout the course of this year. And then the second area that, and we'll get into this, her second area of growth, I'm scrolling down, you can see all the evidence that we've been gathering. Her second area is the use of an instructional framework to observe and analyze teaching practice under the observation and analysis. So those are her targeted areas. And then I think that gives you enough context for where we are at right now. So Juliet, you've been working on these 3 different indicators from the teaching framework, learning targets, your CP4, differentiated instruction, and CP5, which is around use of scaffolds that within the teaching framework. Talk to me about where you and your instructional leadership team are right now, as we left in late February, early March. We had our full day professional development with Dr. Cruz, where he was going to, where he helped you guys lead through a development of your professional learning plan for next year. All of a sudden we come into this screeching halt of a pandemic, and now we're all in a distance learning mode. Just talk to me about where things are at right now for you and your instructional leadership team around this work and what you're thinking about heading into next year.
Jeff, if I could ask, I know that we have this structure in front of us, but I think what might be helpful is if I could walk you through the dates and times in my meetings and where we kind of left off, just to kind of catch up to where we're at and make sure we're on the same page. Yep. And then I'll fill you in on those details. So if you remember the other document.
Yep, I'll share that right now. Let me grab it.
And just to give some context around it, basically this document, I created it on my own. Not every principal uses this document, but it was a way for me to articulate and verbalize with Jeff as my evaluator.
This one, I believe, right?
Basis.
Okay. And we'll scroll down to where we left off.
I like this view a little bit better because it gives you really specific, concrete dates and examples of the work I've been doing.
Would you like to go to where we left off?
Yeah, go ahead and scroll down. I really mapped out as we went through our work, every meeting, and I really tried to pull out evidence of how I was working towards that specific indicator. And, I was really detailed as we got to December. And then once we got to this spring, obviously everything picks up really quickly. But as a new principal in the Newhall School District, if you could, in the Newhall School District, I was really able to build my rapport with my staff after the winter break. I think it takes a few months, as you know, as the new person in any district to really build the trust. And as you and I had been discussing earlier on, that was one of my goals just outside of these indicators. In order to do any of this work, I really needed to build rapport and trust with my staff and really understand the nuances of how Newhall does things, right? The implicit and the explicitly stated and the unexplicitly stated rules and expectations and cultural norms around this organization. So I feel like after a few months, I've really gotten there. And so this is where you're going to see that I've taken up some speed around my ILT work and the indicators that we're talking about. So in March, so January, we were meeting, and I feel like as a group, we were still trying to, meld together, because it was, I inherited a team from the last principal, and they had done like a good year or two of work together. And so with me coming in, they were really trying to figure out what my vision, what my expectations were. And I'm a very different leader than the last principal. And so what I really tried to share with them that, this year was a year where I was really going to support the work that they had been working on over the last couple of years. I wasn't going to change what they had been doing because they did it so well. That was the conversation we had when I got hired, is I'm at a very strong school. They're very high performing. I really just need to maintain and continue steering the ship in the right direction and moving with the momentum that we have. So once we hit this, so at the ILT trainings, one of the strategies I had was to make sure we had a working lunch. So we could just spend that time like very loosely and together talking through the work that Dr. Cruz had trained us on. And at the last meeting, this was really critical, because on March 4th, we had talked through, we had a good couple hours after the training where we really were able to apply the information that Dr. Cruz gave us. So through an equity lens, we could dial into the work that we were doing with the indicators and why that was so important. So I think for me, just kind of, I'll come back to your specific question. We were able to bridge connections that didn't exist prior to that meeting. So I feel
Why do
like—
you think that, what can I ask? Why do you think that happened now?
It happened now. I think one, trust. I think for me, after working through the rubric and digging into the evaluation process on my end. So one of the things that it was new to me, this whole work using the cell framework, having conversations with teachers, I was able to, I mean, one, the team had trust, and then two, I also had a little bit more buy-in because I had been having these ongoing conversations with teachers about the indicators. So just from a leadership perspective, I could kind of drive the ship a little bit more. But then two, why now? I just think that the team had had enough time working with the indicators and unpacking them and spending more time having conversations to reflect upon them in order to take some action steps. I think we couldn't get to that place as a new principal because we were really just working through the logistics of keeping the school running in the right direction. I know that sounds a little bit off, but when you come to the meetings, a lot of the times we've had so many new initiatives that were coming through. We couldn't deeply dive into the indicators until now. And so while we talked about them and we addressed them, we had conversations around them, we realized that we needed to unpack them in a way that the teachers had their hands in the clay, right? They were the ones working with the language and really defining what we wanted teachers to know and be able to do as a team in a classroom. And so Amanda, so through our leadership team meetings, Amanda had modeled that for me. And I was able to take that model that we had as principals of unpacking the standard and the way she did it. And I was able to bring that to the ILT, and ILT felt comfortable after doing it themselves and then taking it to a staff meeting. So it was that top-down model: I do, you do, we do. And I think all of us felt confident in really trying to help the teachers understand what those indicators and rubrics are. Now,
I mean, that was one of the things I was going to ask you. What were your leadership moves that you made? So what you're saying is your leadership move that you made to make this accessible for your staff so that it made sense that you could move forward with a plan is, you know, you took something you learned and you observed in a district leadership team meeting, and then took that protocol or structure and then used it with your instructional leadership team.
Yeah, so the modeling that happened in our principal meetings, so from the district level, like we were given the training and just a strategy on how to approach this work. I think for me, that was very concrete. And for me, being new to the work, I couldn't intuitively design anything. I really needed some real concrete examples. And so when Amanda presented that, our director of HR, I took that right away. That was really concrete for me to do. It was very actionable. I took that directly to my ILT and they liked it and they felt very confident in it. And then we presented it to staff. So I think for me, being on the newer side of all of this work, you know, I don't have the ability to put it all together as quickly as maybe some of the other principals, but having those concrete examples of what we can do in a meeting, that really worked. So the modeling.
So how, from your perspective,
really helped, and it transferred over to my staff meetings. So where we are, we've unpacked all three indicators. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, just a question. So how do you see this, that work really aligning to the concept of leading into what you have noted here on April 27th around your school site council meeting that you just had? How does that all align to the work around growth mindset and vision mission work?
That's a good question. Well, so in our training with Dr. I'm going to tease this out a little bit. So I'll ask you to help.
There's not a right or wrong answer here. I'm just curious what your perspective is in terms of, you know, how does that work? You've identified, and you're talking about pulling out these indicators and making sure everyone has a clear understanding of those indicators, right? You've unwrapped them now, or you're going to, and so with your instructional, so how does that connect to the role of vision and mission in a school, and in particular around growth mindset?
So I'm going to talk this through a little bit. So with Dr. Cruz, one of the activities, again, he gave me a really concrete example. Dr. Cruz, so he trained all the principals and all the school sites on equity work, and he's from PLC that works with the DuFours. And Dr. Luis Cruz, he's written several books, but he had talked a lot about really making sure that the vision and mission align with the work that we're doing in ILT and with our teachers, and making sure that we had buy-in with the staff, and making sure that it was authentic to the work that we're doing today, not from last year, not from 2 years ago, but to revisit that. And so as an ILT, we were able to look that over. I know they did work at the end of last year, but for my team, what we've decided, because we had that meeting in March, and we felt like we were a little behind with the indicators, is we decided we're gonna hit this work in August when we start the year in terms of the vision and mission piece of like the overall school, because it didn't make sense to pull it in from August when we were just right there. But in terms of the work with ILT, we talked about how essential it was to shift the paradigm that the teachers had about the work that we were doing with CEL. So this new rubric, this new evaluation system, it was really critical that teachers understood that we needed to embrace this, because it was what's best for kids, knowing that it was an authentic way to really clearly define the work that was happening in the class. And so for me, aligning the vision and mission with the concept of growth mindset, we had to pair all of that together with the teachers. And so I'm not making sense, but let me clarify.
Well, can I just ask, here's one thing I'm thinking. So one of the areas that you have targeted is around differentiation. So what I was thinking as you're talking is, if a teacher really embraces differentiation, isn't there then a connection to growth mindset? Because if a teacher has a fixed mindset, they're going to do what? They're going to deliver it in a modality and say you either get it or you didn't, and oh, they weren't paying attention or whatever. I mean, we're elementary kids, but you know what that looks like. Versus a teacher who embraces and understands what differentiation is about, they have to have some sort of growth mindset, because they're believing that the kid has not gotten it yet.
Right.
Right.
So in my plan, early on in the other document, I mentioned ADKAR model, and a lot of it, it's this whole change management theory, and he talks a lot about, I say it's he, but it could be she's the author, I'm not quite sure. They talk a lot about just knowledge, like delivering the knowledge, like making sure that your teachers and your staff and everyone that's going through this change process, because this evaluation, this CEL work was really in the information before they did anything with that work. So, it's just this awareness of it, right? Before we move into the desire to want to change, and then providing like the skill set to do that. The first 6 months of my work was really providing like the groundwork to like reshape their thinking. So I think for me, I want to continue this work a little bit more explicitly in terms of the growth mindset. So I purchased the book, The Growth Mindset Coach, and there's monthly activities you can do every month to reinforce the concepts behind growth mindset. And so I picked that up, I think once I got my feet grounded, I picked up that book and I introduced it to ILT, and they want to start the year with that in August. We'll be introducing a growth mindset concept, really concrete. What I had done before was really infusing the work of Carol Dweck in faculty meetings, opening up with a quote and discussing it, sharing TED Talks. So just providing information, not asking them to do anything with it. But what I did notice was it started impacting, or they started having a better understanding of it. And so I'm seeing it now in the classroom, and they have a better understanding. I'm still not asking them to do anything concrete with it, because I feel like this year was really knowledge gathering and making sure that they had a good concept of what that was.
Well, do you see, I mean, I'm looking at it. So you've got CP4, curriculum pedagogy number 4, which is around differentiated instruction. And then curriculum pedagogy 5 is around scaffolds. So if teachers are embracing and understanding the purpose and power behind differentiation and scaffolds, rather than dumbing down the curriculum to a kid who can't get there, right? So you have you have a 5th grader who's reading at the 2nd grade level, and a teacher who doesn't embrace the use of differentiated instruction and scaffolds. They're not going to give that kid a 5th grade passage that's been with some scaffolds to it. Instead, they're going to give them something easier and never move that child along. So you and I haven't really talked about it in this context, but there's a really tight, I believe there's a tight connection between how you could connect those 2 indicators to growth mindset.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we haven't, that was the one piece ILT and I talked about, is that we haven't, so we've done equity work, we've done the cell work, we've done the indicators, like individually, we've unpacked all these major concepts. But like you said, and bringing me back to this, we haven't connected the dots for everybody. And that was the piece we were going to work on in March. It was the idea of really, so Dr. Cruz comes from the PLC background, so kind of unpacking that, unpacking the equity work, unpacking the framework for our new evaluation system, and then digging into the framework and just pulling out these 3 indicators. But we haven't connected the dots for the teachers. And that's what our ILT team really felt like it was missing. So that helps me. That's a really good, again, concrete example of how I can draw this back to the team. I think that's a piece we haven't thought through to present to the staff, right? Is like drawing out those connections. But that's a good example of work I haven't done yet. And
and the thing too is you have kind of the model inclusion program in our district, right? So you have your SDC teachers push inclusion, and your psychologists, like, I mean, no other school in our district does. Most of that success is a result of differentiated instruction and scaffolds. But really important is it's connected to the fact that your teachers do have a growth mindset, that those kids can go into the classroom with the expectations of their peers and be successful. And you inherited, when you came in this year as a brand new principal, a school that had kids who were sitting in a traditional SDC program who met or even exceeded standards on their grade level CAS as a result of this work. So those things are all connected to this area of focus that you're looking around, which is your desire to bring and support growth mindset. So that might be something for you to think through, and you and I can partner with. How can I take this work that they've been working through and weave in real structured training and support for them around growth mindset to take us to the next level? And it might be disaggregating your data based upon student group to say our lowest performing group is maybe it's Hispanic, special education, EL students. It could be that granular, and that's where the biggest gap is. And then figuring out what's the ration, why are they not performing? What are they not doing? Is it connected to our growth mindset? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just how we are scaffolding, differentiating, and those kind of things for our kids.
Right. Now that definitely, I'm happy that you said that, because that was where our team was headed. So I have an ILT meeting coming up in the next week or two. And I think what I would like to do, and I'll probably contact you to tease this out a little bit, but we want to make those connections, but we haven't done it yet. Like I said, it's been very piecemeal, but like, I think you're right. It's going, I think, reminding the staff again, why were we so successful? They really did. They didn't just focus on this. Last year it was learning targets. They did a really great job with that. I mean,
there was only 2 schools in our district that were blue in ELA and math. And you were one of the 2 schools, which traditionally Meadows has not been. It's always been Stevenson Ranch and Oak Hills. And for once, all of a sudden, Meadows, who's kind of usually that 4th in line, very high performing school, all of a sudden you elevated your status, to a different level. And it was because of some purposeful things that were made. So how do you envision, when you said you have an ILT meeting coming up. So how do you envision, so we can close out our conversation maybe the next 10 minutes, how do you envision facilitating that work remotely? You're muted.
I'm sorry, how do I facilitate that work for?
Well, yeah, how do you see facilitating this discussion that you just were talking about with your ILT that's coming up? Because it's different. Like, in a traditional meeting, I know where you guys do your training, you're sitting around your table, you might have a document that you're typing up into, taking minutes, or sometimes you guys are charting paper. How are you gonna make that meeting come out with actionable steps where everyone felt like they were participating in those kind of things? I mean, have you even started to think through what that's going to look like? And maybe you haven't, and that's okay. But we could talk for 5 minutes about what that might look like.
Yeah, this next meeting is a really important one because we've had some time off. The momentum's slowed. We've had all these emergencies and the pandemic, and we've lost the connection a little bit. And so
because you guys were going to do some vertical articulation work or something too, right?
We're doing that today.
Okay.
And so that was another powerful, we talked about this. You saw that I talked about this at the ILT, and you drew out the connection. You were there to observe me in that meeting.
Yep, I was.
Great, because you were able to give examples of other schools that had done or have been doing articulation. I mean, it's not a new concept, but it's something my school just hadn't done. And
what was interesting, some of your veterans said, we used to do that 15 years ago, right? Yeah. So, I mean, like, they remembered it, and they actually sort of alluded to that they miss not doing those things and engaging in those conversations.
Because you mentioned it in that meeting, I mean, you'd ask that question, kind of help them think it through. I had her present at the staff meeting.
Oh, you did? She did? She presented?
She presented on it.
Wow, that's really cool.
I literally handed it over to the ILT because I think what it was that we talked through what it would look like. I mean, kind of like what we're doing here, right? I hadn't given much thought to the ILT because I'm just reinstating all these meetings right now, and we were trying to launch the distance. I feel like I'm giving excuses with the distance platform, but in thinking through this next meeting, I know it's a critical one, and one of the pieces that will be important is for me to step back and allow them to do the planning and the work, because we're putting together the PD plan as well. And so stepping back and letting them recognize and reaffirm why they were so successful, kind of like just asking those coaching questions like you're doing. I think I'd want to think through maybe the approach or strategy that you think might be more successful in that particular meeting, because it's going to be an important one for them to feel empowered to do the work in the fall, right? Like we need to get back into what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, and the hard thing right now is we don't know what the fall is going to look like. We don't know whether the fall is going to be still in this modality, or are we going to be able to be, in person, and those just bring different context. But I think if you think through what your plan is, and your end in mind, here's what I want to get out of that. These are my 2 or 3 objectives, goals that I want to leave this meeting with, and then think through what protocols would help you get there. Is it and it could be even a graphic organizer document that you screen share, and it might be a simple thing as a Venn diagram. It could be other things that you're looking through to, so that everyone feels heard. You might even think too of having given them some think time ahead, and ask them to share some thoughts coming in, so that you have that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So you're not spending time, because one of the hard things in a virtual chat is there's a lot of pause, and you and I, it's easy because it's just 2 of us right now engaging in it. But when you have 5 teachers, then people are waiting. And so it does slow down a process. But maybe you might be able to create some probing questions for them to think about around, and I'm just going to connect it to what we just did last Friday in our leadership team meeting. Remember, we took time to say, okay, in June of 2021, this is what we want it to look like in the Newhall School District, connected to the implementation of the 5D. Remember, we talked about all that. And just today in cabinet, Dee, our assistant soup of instruction, brought that to us to say, is this language really capturing what we heard all of our principals saying? And she's going to bring that to you this Friday. So it might be even asking them that question, and then you might be able to have some dialogue even before you get into the meeting, back and forth, or create a shared Google Doc and have people edit it in there. And then you come in with that, and then you really talk about, okay, if this is where we want to be in June of 21 as a staff at Meadows, what are the highest leverage things that we need to take on and lead? Because you have a tremendous team who really does want to lead from a professional development leadership role. And you're the support, you're the catalyst for that work, which is the power of teachers leading teachers, not just principals leading teachers.
Hey, Jeff and Juliet, I'm going to go ahead and maybe bring this to a close just because I'm looking at our time.
I was just wrapping up, James. Jeez.
I am so sorry. Do you
No,
want me to
good.
let you wrap up?
No, you're good. You're good.
No, I just because we're getting some great observations, but I know some folks in the room are going to have some questions.
Yep.
So why don't you just wrap up 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll go back to the main slide presentation, and we'll take questions from the participants.
Yep. So, I mean, that would be my thought, Juliet, would be, maybe doing some of the legwork ahead of time, getting that clear vision from them, and a definition of what they want. And then if you have that, then all of next year, you can do that check-in. Are we on track? Or are we not? And so you have a clear definition of what your learning target would be for the end of the year, learning goal, and then maybe even defining what that success criteria look like. And then that becomes your framework for all the work moving forward.
No, that's great, Jeff. I like the idea of front loading the meeting. I feel like we waste so much time just getting set up sometimes with these virtual meetings. Having the time beforehand to really reflect and get ready for the meeting would be a good suggestion. I'm going to start this tomorrow. I have office hours in the office. I'm going to take out the big chart papers.
Yep.
I'm going to take pictures and send that over to them.
And send it, if you want my feedback, those kind of things, I love and eat this stuff up. So I'm glad to be a thought partner with you. Share it with me. And if I don't have an idea, I'll share it with Dee. Even if it's a graphic organizer or protocol that you need, or we can think through with you, we're here to support. So always good meeting with you and chatting with you, and hopefully this was beneficial. I'll be scheduling you known about end of May. We'll check in, and then one more in June, and that'll kind of wrap up our coaching year for the year.
Right. Thank you, Jeff.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, Jeff and Juliet, thank you so much. So now what I'm going to do is share my screen to go back to our PowerPoint and take some questions. I'm wondering, Amy, if you see any questions that we might need to address.
Sure, James, let me just check. We got, as you pointed out, lots of great comments from our northern crew and our southern crew as they listened. Don't know that there's, let's see, as we go through here, maybe there are some specific questions. There was a question about sharing the Google Doc that you were using, Jeff, whether you would be open to sharing that.
Not a problem. I can get it to James.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And then with just some really great comments throughout here about what the coach is doing to help the coachee. You know, allowing for brainstorming and collective sharing of ideas. This notion of just having permission to think together out loud with a thought partner can be so helpful. And definitely the rapport between the two is obvious, but the importance of having that trust and rapport for coaching is so important to the work. And we were able to see Juliet shift her thinking to planning for the future, which is great to see that in the moment learning, really, that was going on. And then we do have a question. I wonder if the principal could have come up with any of those pre-meeting front-loading ideas and ways to adapt her online meeting space on her own. Could the coach have asked, how might you front-load this content for your staff instead of just giving the ideas, I guess. So I don't know, Jeff, if you want to talk about your approach there. And
you know, for me, I chose to give those ideas because I did ask her a really difficult question. You know, in terms of making that connection to the indicators that they're working on in their staff and trying to draw the through line to what she was working on. And personally, I know Juliet well enough to know that she's a perfectionist, which is nothing wrong with that. I like that. But I knew that for her, she was focused on trying to make that connection. And I felt like if I didn't give her an idea to help her then roll with, then the conversation would have been stalled. That was my perception.
Okay. The thinking behind the talking there for you live from Jeff. And then there were a few more comments that were made. Here's one. I'm curious if there were particular coaching moves, Jeff, that you were considering, or did they just come up during the conversation based on what Juliet said? So did you go in with intentional coaching moves, or did you just kind of go with the flow of the conversation?
See, I think coaching, you have to go with the flow. So if I come in with preconceived notions of where I want to steer her, then I'm not really coaching her. That's just my personal belief. So, you know, I think it's knowing the person that you're working with. And I have 5 different principals that I coach and support. And so you just have to read the situation and then go with the flow. But I don't really, unless there's something that needs to get done, I don't usually come in with a preconceived set of questions even at all. Unless there's something we've talked about with the other 2 principal supervisors that we're trying to get to.
Great.
This is Wayne. I had a question, taking this cognitive coaching model and using this on a different layer. So Juliet, as you're working with your teachers within your school, are you using online platform like this and doing cognitive coaching with your teachers? Specifically, since everybody's in a remote location now, giving them ideas and different methodologies for helping them learn how to teach online, because this is new for, I'm sure, a lot of your teachers. And you know, this is not only a focus for the teacher candidates that we work with, but a lot of veteran teachers, as we know, myself being one from years past, everybody's used to teaching face-to-face, so now everybody's had to migrate to online teaching. So how are you using that cognitive coaching model to help them become better online teachers?
That's a great question. Right now, we are in a place where we're really trying to be very supportive. Our teachers dropped everything they were doing just a few weeks ago and completely transformed their work into an online platform. So I think the messaging, and Jeff, jump in here if I'm wrong in any of this, but it's really been about support and praise. And so I come in, like from a coaching perspective, if they want me to come in and give feedback, that hasn't happened yet because they're all still in the learning and implementation. I think for me, have I used this yet? I do have a meeting I am going to be scheduling. I completed 6 observations on one of my teachers prior to this. And so I'm completing her final evaluation, and I will be giving her feedback based on what I've also seen of the work that she's done on the Google platform. She's been outstanding. I mean, there's just been really clear examples of where she has hit standard 6, for example, professionalism and growth. I definitely want to incorporate that in the meeting that we have, but my role has been very different based on our contract and I think the agreement with our union. So I just wanted to make sure I upheld those agreements that the cabinet and the union had. So
you have, though, on Fridays, right, during collaborative team time, join the PLC conversation, though, right, and engage in that work, though.
Yeah, we attend. So as administrators, we attend every grade level meeting, and we'll have coaching conversations there. So help them think through problems. And so I do attend. They invite me to their grade level meeting. I attend for about 20 minutes. They might suggest a problem or come up with something that they need to work through, and then I coach them through what that could look like. I think top down, right? The model is constantly coaching our teachers, empowering them. That's, from the way Jeff's coached me to what the conversations that we have with teachers. It's never telling them what to do, but helping them think through some of the work that they're doing with kids. And so I hope I answered your question to the extent I could.
That was a fine answer. We have another question. How often, Jeff, do you meet with Juliet during the coaching cycle?
I meet with her every 4 to 6 weeks. So this is probably touch point number 6 or 7 this year, and we'll have 2 more, one in May, and then the final when we meet in June.
Great. Thank you. Are there other questions for those of you who are observing, participating as listeners in this conversation?
By the way, I do want to add that Jeff was a coach for the induction program, so he definitely this is totally what he does on a day-to-day basis. So just wanted to let everyone know he has been an induction coach for the Clear Admin Services program.
Yeah, I was able to do that when I sat in my assistant superintendent role, but when I transitioned to superintendent, I needed to let that go.
A little busy being a superintendent.
Yes.
Jeff, what is the most challenging thing to you in your role when you are a coach, would you say? What is something you would offer out there as something that's challenging? What's easy?
I think the most challenging thing when you yourself were a principal at one time and you made certain actions, and maybe the principal isn't going down a path that you think is the best choice, but it's not detrimental. I mean, if it was detrimental, you'd intervene, right? You'd hard intervene. Right. But how do you coach or help them see from maybe a different perspective without making them feel that their idea is no longer valid? And it's just, it's a fine line between here's another thing to think about versus I think you should just go this way and just do it this way. And I think that's the real art of coaching is coming from a support stance, not a I need to fix you stance.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Amy, we do have another question. Juliet, this is for you. It says, what do you feel has been most effective about this model of coaching for you?
I think for me, it's one, I think having my superintendent be my coach, it was very beneficial in that I could kind of think through and understand more clearly with like the language he uses, the priorities he would talk about, just what was essential in terms of my work through the district lens. You know, that's unique obviously to the situation, right? My superintendent. But I think just the structure of coaching, right? It was an ongoing conversation. You could see it was really authentic. There are times where I didn't know where to go sometimes. He'd ask me questions and I didn't, you know, I might not have even had the time to do the legwork because I was putting out fires as a principal that day. And so I think for me, like Jeff had a vision of like some of the priority items that I needed to focus on as a principal, and he would kind of he'd coach me back to that, right? It's like as a principal, you're constantly addressing situations as they come up. Sometimes you're addressing parents all day or teachers or children, and you don't have time to think through like those bigger goals, right? Like the standards, like the indicators that I'm working on. He kind of gave me that big picture lens and would bring that back to me. Okay, so let's refocus on what we're doing. But he also did that through a coaching lens, right? It was never like, he never said that priority item, that urgent situation, that fire wasn't important, but he also guided me back to the work that was most essential for me. And so it was helpful because he never told me what to do. I was never wrong in the work that I'm doing because our work is so complex as educators, right? From teachers to principals, the complexity of the day, there's so many things that happen. I think this conversation, the work, the journaling, it really guided me back to like my higher purpose, right? The essentials. And I could kind of prioritize that in my mind as we worked together. And I felt like for me, I felt very proud of the moments where I could, you know, provide examples to the work that, you know, the earlier goals I had set, if that makes sense. So there was a lot there. I think just the ongoing conversation, the coaching, directing me back to our goals, just making me feel empowered and motivated. I think an evaluation process could also be defeating if you don't handle it correctly and you have like a really strong educator. For me, I'm driven by this like conversation and feedback. And so I think Jeff really took to knowing my personality and what worked for me in that coaching role too. So knowing me as a person and what worked was really helpful.
You know, the goal is, to me, as I look at this whole process, is that when the narrative is written about her evaluation at the end of the year, there should be no surprises. She should be able to look in that document and know that, you know, I mean, in a normal year, we'd have testing data that would be included and those kind of things, and she would already know that as well. But there shouldn't be any surprises around the narrative that I'm going to write on. And there'll be lots of things that she can do. There's still going to be things that she's on the verge of, and she's growing her practice. And that's natural. I mean, we all are evolving. And we really believe in this coaching work because we know two things. The teacher's the number one indicator for student success, and right behind the teacher is the principal. And so that's why we have invested so much work around adopting a framework for both teachers and principals, but all doing it through the lens of a coaching and support role to really help move the work along. Rather than being done to people, it's done with people.
Very good. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is start to wrap this up. We want to let everyone know that we do have YouTube playlists for both the Cal TPA as well as the Cal APA, and the addresses for locating those playlists are on this screen. The Cal TPA YouTube playlist is in green, and the Cal APA YouTube playlist is in blue. And This particular webinar will be edited and then uploaded, and you should be able to find it later today or early tomorrow morning. I want to thank Jeff and Juliet so much for allowing us to come into their coaching conversation. Normally this would be highly confidential. However, we really appreciate you allowing us to be really clinical supervisors in this, to see what it is that you're doing and how this definitely impacts education and can be such an important resource that we can share with other educators. So again, Jeff and Juliet, thank you so much. Amy, as our illustrious leader, any last words?
No, I just want to offer my thanks as well. We appreciate that you would share your conversation with us, and trust that we will all take from it a great deal of learning and use it productively. So thank you for giving us some time today during these challenging times, and we appreciate all that you are doing.
Thank you so much.
All right, we just want to mention too that we will have another online webinar next week, and we are lining that up. So watch the PSD e-news for information about what we will offer for the next several weeks. And if you have ideas on topics you would like us to address, please let us know. Thank you.